Hi, I'm Alex McClintock. I've invited Heinz Tonn to talk to me about enterprise architecture and in particular the diagrams that he produces as part of that. Heinz, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, thanks, Alex, for the introduction. My name is Heinz Tonn. I'm an enterprise architect, and this slide deck is really about explaining of what my work is doing. I've experienced a lot of people working with me or alongside me. In the first instance, they don't really know what I'm doing. And I would like to explain, ideally in less than 5 minutes. I don't know if that's possible, but that's something which I always admired in other experts I came across, that they could explain what they are doing and why it's important in a very short time.
Heinz, so here we see a picture of how not to do it. And I guess that the criticism is that enterprise architects just produce diagrams and they don't necessarily help anybody. What can you tell me about this?
Yes, it's something which I think we both have experienced. Probably you probably more when you're sitting in the audience. I have to admit that I might have stood on the podium and made these kind of lengthy explanations, which then resulted in riots or the audience falling into sleep. The mistake we or I as an enterprise architect are making is that we're trying to explain what the purpose of or what enterprise architecture is, and we end up explaining how we do it. And because it's so complicated, explaining how we do it is letting us chase down the wrong alley. So rather than trying to say how I'm doing it, I like to explain of what it actually is and why I'm doing it. Yes, and enterprise architecture, let's take a step back. Enterprise architecture is about describing the enterprise. And the enterprise, I don't just mean technology. I don't just mean the IT, I also mean processes, maybe just the ecosystem, maybe competitors, markets, market conditions, client interactions, and all these kind of things. So enterprise architecture describes business and technology. And there are fundamentally two ways of doing that. You can either describe the enterprise as is, we also call it baseline, with all its flaws and little problem areas and things like that. And the second way of describing the architecture is to show a picture of how it could look like with improved processes, with new applications, with less service, and these kind of things. When we have these two descriptions, we put them side by side, and then we play spot the difference. And whatever we come up with in spot the difference is basically the scope of a project or program.
Heinz, so you told me about these diagrams. Can you actually explain a bit more about what goes into these diagrams?
Well, diagrams is only part of it. Diagrams is what you mostly see from enterprise architects, because that is showing an overview of all the documentation, description, and documentation behind it. So the diagrams consists of boxes and lines between these boxes, which are elements. Elements can be a server or a process, and that can be described in more detail in a textual form. And the dependencies are the dependencies between these elements. So a server is hosting an application, or a process using an application. So talking a little bit more detail about the elements and the dependencies, I want to give a couple of examples here. That a stakeholder executes a process, or when a process is creating documents or data, one can see that whatever enterprise architecture is doing with the diagrams, with the elements and dependencies, as well as a textual description behind them, is describing the enterprise business as a whole in a very formal way.
So Heinz, I'm used to this sort of thing when I describe the technical architecture, but you're talking about other things like processes. So what do you describe absolutely everything in the enterprise?
Well, it really depends. You can describe everything in the enterprise, but the problem with that is you would have to have a lot of people to actually describe everything in the enterprise all the time and be up to date. And that would obviously be a very costly undertaking. So what normally happens is that you have a specific focus point when you're describing things in an architectural way. And the purpose we get, or the reason why we're starting to do an enterprise architecture, why we're describing things in more detail, is a project or a program. And that, as we have seen, is starting with an objective or with a goal to reduce IT costs, for example. We go around, we found out where IT costs can be reduced, which servers can be switched off or consolidated. And this objective of a program or project also gives us the focus point of what we describe in an enterprise. So if I'm going, for example, let's take the first one, IT cost reduction, I would look at the servers and services. I wouldn't necessarily look at the organization. I wouldn't necessarily look at the processes, and maybe only as far as I'm saying the processes have to stay the same, and the services, applications need to continue supporting the same process as before. But my main focus would be, when I'm doing an IT cost reduction project or program, that I'm analyzing servers, services, interfaces, hosting platforms, technologies, and applications. And the same applies if I'm doing a process improvement or regulation change, or like anything else.
Heinz, so I guess if you are an enterprise architect working for a company long term, you might be building up this model and enhancing it over time, but it's not necessarily going to cover everything. It's just going to cover the important things that are that have been important up till then. Does
that is correct. That is sort of an evolutionary approach of saying I document only the things I'm touching, sort of thing. So I'm looking around, finding my way around the room with a torchlight. I don't switch on the big light, because the big light sort of takes away too much energy. Having said that, I think there's also space, if you're doing a proper enterprise architecture and practice within an organization, that you describe everything on a very, very high level. So processes like finance, that can be a myriad of processes underneath. You can describe a year and a day describing financial management process or accounting processes, or you can say in financial management process there are these 5 sub-processes. And if you leave it to that high level, you can cover the whole enterprise and cover the whole playing field.
And then you delve into the detail as and when it's needed.
Exactly.
Right. Heinz, thank you very much for the information. I hope everybody enjoyed it. If anybody's left with any questions, please find us on LinkedIn and do ask. Maybe we'll put it in another video or send you some information directly. Thanks very much.
Thanks.